Welcome to the Exit Your Business Your Way podcast with Ross Brannon, guiding business owners to the exit they deserve. Ross is a financial advisor who knows that business owners work too hard on growing and caring for their businesses not to leave it on their terms. Each week he interviews a different experienced business owner, expert, and other professionals ready to teach you effective, satisfying business exit strategies that will let you exit your business your way. Don't wait until it's too late. Start thinking exit now. Here's your host, Ross Brannon.
Hello and welcome to the Exit Your Business Your Way podcast. I'm your host, Ross Brannon. This week, our guest is Michael Butler, the Senior Director at Footprint Capital, an investment bank in Columbus, Ohio that focuses on advising owners of middle market companies. Michael is in charge of sell side and buy side, and he's here to share his wisdom with us today. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, let's just kind of jump right in here. We hear the word investment bank a lot. I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I'm in financial services, but people hear investment banks, hear about investment banking all the time. Can you kind of, for the business owner out there who might be listening, what is an investment bank and why might they want to talk to one?
Yeah. Great question to start with. Yeah, certainly those names like Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch and all those others that do, take companies public are the big, different kind of investment banks. We're more of the best way to understand us or to understand what we do is we're more M&A advisors, merger and acquisition advisors to companies. A great example might be we just would help a business owner monetize their company at the end of their career, sell it to a third party is an example. And we'll do that through a closed or private auction process. On the flip side, we also work with business owners that are looking to grow their companies by acquisition. So they may come to us and say, hey, Michael, I'm in the, let's say, digital marketing area. I want to acquire more digital marketing companies like mine and grow my footprint, if you will. And so we would help them find those companies, make those marriages, and complete those transactions. So it's either, what we call that would be what we call a buy side transaction, and where we're helping a seller, those are called a sell side transaction. But that's really what investment banking is all about, or at least the portion of the market that we're participating in.
Well, we like to, in the financial services realm, we like to talk in acronyms and make ourselves sound smarter than we actually are. Yeah. So no one knows what the heck we're talking about. So you guys focus on middle market companies. So let's define middle market for people out there.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, we actually kind of say we're lower middle market. And we kind of define that by companies that have earnings between $2 and $10 million as being sort of the sweet spot for us. We certainly have worked on companies with less than $2 million, but really the sweet spot of 2 to 10 million of annual earnings is really the kind of the number. We typically use an acronym called EBITDA, and EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And we actually more technically, it's something we call adjusted EBITDA, and that's where we add back expenses the owner might be taking out on a personal basis. So as an example, they may have their kids on the payroll who really aren't performing any kind of job, or they may be running their personal vehicles or vacations or any kind of personal expenses through the company. Those would all get added back to their earnings because really those things won't occur in the future if they sell their company to a new buyer, if you will.
That makes perfect sense. So let's talk about, the type of industries that you guys deal with typically.
We always say we're industry agnostic, meaning that we just really have worked in a number of different industries, although we've got particular, specialties and experience in what we've done in the past. So we've been involved in the healthcare industry, specifically some, medical practices, ophthalmology, dermatology, things like that. In the medical space, we've also been involved in medical equipment, what's called durable medical equipment. And we've worked in a number of different spaces there. But logistics, really trucking companies, we've sold a number of those. We've sold a number of light manufacturing companies, business services companies, B2B companies as they're called. We've also done quite a bit in the consumer services arena. And by that, I mean HVAC, plumbing, electrical, basement repair, things like that. Those are consumer services or consumer home services that really are a particularly hot area these days, and that's one of our niches. But beyond that, we've had a smattering of a bunch of other assignments since our 2014 start, and been very successful at getting quite a few of those to a successful transaction.
Well, you talk about consumer services and like specifically HVACs. I live in Florida. I have a theory that if you want to be a virtual guaranteed millionaire, start an HVAC company in the southeast part of the United States.
Well, I'll tell you, man, it's you can't be without it, right?
No, you can't. And so obviously you have to know how to run a business, because there's plenty of people who are just an AC guy with a truck, and there's plenty of people who actually run businesses. When you sell a consumer services like a contractor side business, whether it's plumbing, electrical, HVAC, you're based in Columbus, Ohio. I'm based in Tallahassee, Florida. If you're selling an HVAC company in Columbus, Ohio, is the buyer someone in the same state, in the same region? Or are you dealing with HVAC companies that are a fair amount bigger and they're like regional?
Yeah. Well, it could be a lot of things. We'll do in terms of reaching out to buyers is we'll reach out to a whole bunch of folks. So, right now with HVAC as an example, we've actually sold a number of these recently. We've actually sold them to private equity, and private equity are obviously professional investors and professionals that buy and sell companies, for underlying investors. And so we've sold a number of those to private equity, and they've done quite well. It seems to be a hot area. But what you mentioned, selling to, let's say, a competitor in another town, as an example. Let's say I'm in Columbus, Ohio, like you mentioned. Let's say right outside of town is Dayton, Ohio. So someone may say, "Hey, I've got a great HVAC practice here in Columbus. I like to expand my practice to Dayton. I want to go buy somebody over there." So we might help them locate somebody to acquire and grow in that way.
Talk about a professional investor buying a business. If I was a professional investor and I want to go buy, Joe's HVAC company here in Tallahassee, Florida, obviously that's a great cash flow investment if I'm doing it the right way. The challenge is, from a management standpoint, the owner is going to want to typically leave, or at least they're not going to want to have a boss, so they're likely not going to be there. So talk a little about that environment when you have a professional investor buying an operating business who is not an actual operator.
So a lot of times we'll see investors that want to buy themselves, really, they hate to say it this way, but the best way to describe it, buy themselves a job, if you will. So they may say, "Hey, I want to run a company, and I've chosen HVAC as an example. Let me go find a successful company today where the owner is looking to get out." And typically what ends up happening when you sell a company, there's a transition period. And that transition period can be a year, could be 2, could be 3. But typically that owner has to agree to stay on for a period of time to transition the employee relationships, the customer relationships, all those kinds of things. But we'll talk to those folks, those investors, and help them find a company they're looking for. But the same token, really, most of the time we're representing the sellers. So what we're doing is, for the sellers, is we're trying to find viable buyers with the financial resources and the access to capital, either through their own pocketbooks or ability to tap into to debt, getting a bank loan to buy that company. A lot of times that business transaction occurs through some cash at close and some earnout, or some what we call a seller note, where the actual seller is actually loaning some of the money to that investor. So it could be any combination of things there. But really our goal is to find, business and appropriate buyer and bring the two together. And really we're just, in that regard, we're kind of financial matchmakers.
Yeah, for sure. And is that professional investor, they're trying to actually get in the operating business, or are they trying to put somebody in the operating business and still be hands off?
It's both. We do see both types. It's very typical for folks. For instance, I'm working with a guy right now who's trying to acquire a number of different unrelated businesses and kind of, play sort of a high level board role in a lot of those businesses. But he's not going to, get his hands dirty, so to speak, at running those businesses day to day. And he's a professional investor with some assets that he is looking to deploy into these things. So in his mind, this is a better way of investing his money than putting it into, let's say, the public equity markets, which can be rocky at times. He likes to have a little bit more control over his future. And frankly, this has got a lot more risk involved in investing in individual businesses. But as a result, anything that's got more risk generally has more return. And so he's looking for that additional return he can receive after as owning those businesses. And we might help him find the businesses, but we also might help him sell the businesses when he feels like they've peaked out.
So if I'm a business owner and I met you at the bar and we were talking and I was kind of getting up there in age and just kind of getting worn out or tired of the grind, what advice would you give me about selling my business? What kind of ducks do I have to have in a row?
Good question. First of all, we always say the person that the people that plan the most for their exit event are going to do the best, and they'll do the best in the long run.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
Most people don't plan at all. If they do plan, they plan about 30 to 90 days, and then they're ready to go.
You got it. That's usually when we get the call. They're ready to go. And if they can, and if we can, any bit of advice I can give to anybody out there listening as a business owner, it's difficult to plan your exit because you're not thinking about the exit. You're thinking about running your business every day and what's going to happen tomorrow. But if you can sit back, think strategically about where you want to be in the future, how many years you have left in the business, what you need to do to prepare that business for sale and your retirement. So what you want to do as an example, probably the biggest problem we see with an owner-operated business is the owner dominates everything that's going on in the business. They're involved with every big customer. They're running day-to-day the operations in the business, and they can't even take a vacation in many cases. That's a sort of a recipe for disaster in terms of selling a business, because a buyer knows, like you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, that you're going to be leaving the business in a year or two, or maybe even sooner. And with that, they want to find a business that will continue in the future without you as an owner. And so putting giving responsibilities to your team, if you will, the team that's helping you run the business is vital, and making sure duties are properly aligned are some of the, I guess, the very high level recommendations I would make. But we very often, back to your example though, we will meet business owners that are just ready to go. And our job is to market the business as best we can to a large group of buyers in a private way. And that private way is a pretty important point there. We want to do it quite confidentially. We don't want to tell the world you're ready to sell until you're ready to tell the world yourself and that's usually after the business is sold. And why is that? Because a lot of times when you tell the world ahead of time, the employees get nervous, your customers get nervous, your competitors use it against you. All these sorts of bad things can happen if the word gets out too early, if you will. And so our job is to be kind of hired guns, if you will, to help deploy an exit on the best possible terms in terms of price, terms, and chemistry for an owner.
Well, as they say, and I quote a fair amount, loose lips sink ships.
You got it, man.
You don't want your business out there, your personal business out there, and you don't want it to, because if it's common knowledge that your business is on the market, that's definitely going to have an effect in that. So how often do you see these company owners, CEOs, presidents, whatever their title is, their company, kind of dominate the company and can actually change to sell their business because they've been doing it that way for 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
Right.
You don't unlearn that in a weekend.
No.
Part of it's personality, part of it's control freak. How hard is it for people to make that change?
Yeah. Oh, it's very difficult. And it's something that's why you got to sort of plan early and often, if you will. But a lot of times, I'll give you an example of a company we just sold, Ohio-based company that we sold, and the owner did dominate the day-to-day operations. He kind of managed every kind of nuance of it. But the new company that acquired him knew that. And what they did is, their job day one after the transaction closed, after the company was sold, was to start to find his replacement. Okay, so they brought in replacements right away, pick somebody, and are currently training that person to evolve to eventually take over that person's job over the next year. So it's not uncommon that the buyer will do that. I will tell you this though, a lot of times that kind of situation will cost a seller, the business seller, some dollars.
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah.
How much theoretically, in a scenario like you just described, will that reduce the sale price? Are we talking like a reduction of a multiple, reduction of a, if the guy was selling for say 5X, is he now, could he have gotten 6X had he had his operation a little smoother, if you will?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. I think a multiple is a very fair way to look at it. And basically, you kind of said that another way. Yeah, basically it cost him, 1 times his earnings in purchase price for not having everything lined up where he or she could walk away from that business rapidly. So doing that really affects your pocketbook in a very positive way. We can help to, help people, kind of think through those things. The owner dominant situation is one of many things that a buyer will look at. And I guess you have to put it this way. If you think about a buyer, they really have 2 objectives in buying a business. They want to limit their risk and they want to increase their opportunity, right? And so by limiting their risk, what they risk is if you leave the company that you'll take, the customers won't repeat. Let's say the customers you have, the employees won't be as loyal to a new manager, as an example, and maybe won't stick around under new leadership. And so that's why you want to have these changes made as much in advance of the sale as possible. But that's not always the case. And quite often we get situations that, sometimes a business transaction or a sale occurs as a result of someone's health issues, divorce, a death, things like that. So we typically, we deal with situations like that where it's not just necessarily burnout, but it's really, kind of forced exit situations. We say it this way. Every company will exit at some point in time. Every owner, I should say, will exit. Yeah. Right. Sort of like it or not, if you will. Whether it's one way or another. You might die in your office. I hate to say it, but by the same token, hopefully the ones that plan well will be able to enjoy, a fruitful, economically, positive situation of retirement and hopefully enjoy life a bit after a long career.
So as you're advising these people, you're their investment banker, you're there helping them on the sell side or the buy side. How often do you become their unpaid shrink in these scenarios?
I'll tell you, that's we sort of have this kind of list of duties, if you will. And the last one is emotional support. And I always say last but not least, and it certainly isn't least. This is a very emotional process. This is someone who has grown a business many times from the start. And they're, selling their baby, if you will. And they're concerned about the legacy of what their company is going to be like in the future, what's going to happen with my employees, what's going to happen with my name on the door, if their name is on the door, all those sorts of things. And it's very easy to get frustrated. And I'll give you an example. So we were trying to sell a company, an HVAC company as an example, in this case. And the owner the things were going really well in terms of just getting through the process. It's a lot of due diligence. It's a lot of looking under every rock and so on. And some issue came up and they had asked about it a couple times before. And he felt like he had adequately answered it, but it just got to the point where he'd been asked so many questions. He was just so frustrated. He kind of said, "You know what? That's it. This is kind of the as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back, right?" And he said, "I just feel like calling off this whole transaction." I said, "Man." And so we kind of had to sit back and say, "Wait a minute. We are about a week away from closing this. This is a really very minor issue. Yeah, they've asked you about it. It's not like they don't trust you, but they just need to, trust but verify, as the old phrase goes." And so we sort of got him over that issue. But it's easy to get riled in the process. You have to be really committed to want to sell a business because it's, there are going to be bumps on the road. I think there's a statistic I've read out there that there's going to be something like, 8 somewhat unexpected things that will come up. It's on average in any kind of deal, and 8 seems like it's depends on how major you want to count those 8. But there are things that come up, challenges, disagreements on every little nuance in the contract, things like that. So it's a tough process, but emotional support is a big part of the job.
And so, do you find, like, your goal is to create like a private auction for the people who are selling their companies? Do you find that the first offer is the best, or, if you don't have any other offers, you need to go out and shop it around and see what's available because someone might be willing to pay more?
Yeah. Here's the way we typically will run these private auctions. And so maybe to answer your question, I need to maybe give you a little nuance. So let's say we take a company and we're going to run what we call a full process, meaning that we're just going to take them through an extensive process. We might generate 100 potential buyers for that company. It could even be more, could be several hundred, if you will. We'll reach out to those several hundred in a systematic way, and we'll actually set a deadline by which they need to respond to us. And so hopefully what we get, Ross, is as many offers on that due date, if you will. And so our goal as a company is always to have several great offers that differ by price and terms and that sort of thing to present to an owner to choose from. But to your example, here's a really another example that kind of comes up when I think about your question. We had somebody as a buyer who jumped in and said, I really want this company, Michael, that you've sent over materials. I'm willing to give you an early offer, and I want you to respond to it quickly. So this company came to us and said, we're excited about this company. We don't want anybody else to get it. Here's a very substantial offer, and it was well above market for that company. We took it to the owner. He said, hey, listen, I'm willing to stop the process and go with this offer right now because, like I said, it's the first one in. It was very high. We always do our homework ahead of time and tell an owner what to expect, what kind of values they should expect, what the market should be willing to pay for a company of their size and history and that sort of thing. And like I said, this is well above that. So this owner decided to take that offer early. But in a more typical situation, we might have 5 offers for a company, as an example, and all of them will be slightly different. And so they'll all have to be, stacked up side by side and evaluated in such a way. And the highest offer doesn't always win the day. A lot of times it has to do with what they're going to do with the company, and how they're going to treat the employees, and under what terms does the cash come to you. There are things called earnouts, and an earnout, as the name implies, is if the company reaches certain financial objectives, there's a larger payout that gets paid in the future, not at close. So
that's actually a perfect segue, because I know through another person, I heard a story of, as in the dental space, there's private equity is coming in hard and heavy and buying practices out for crazy multiples. This other broker told me the story about this dentist who got an 11x multiple, which is insane. But, it was like 70% upfront, 30% earnout.
Very typical. Yep.
Right. After 90 days, she left because the culture was so bad.
Right.
She couldn't stand it anymore. So that 11x was really more like 7.5x. And, but 11x was the biggest, sexiest offer. And that's where this individual went. And had they potentially done some more due diligence, maybe the biggest number isn't the best.
Yep, absolutely.
In this situation, cost that individual some money, but it was worth walking away because how bad it was.
Yeah, I understand that. And there's many owners that have a real difficult time working for somebody else after they've been running their company for themselves for many years, and all of a sudden they have lo and behold, they have a boss, or someone they have to speak to. Maybe even that person may not be present every day, but maybe someone that is looking over their shoulder when they've never had that kind of oversight. So you're absolutely right. And so what people have to be comfortable with is, we say it this way, if the earnout, in the case of what you mentioned, if the earnout were never to be paid, would you be happy with the amount that you received at close? And if the answer is yes, then that can still be a good offer. But you're right, though, that these offers will differ considerably about what will be paid at close and what's going to be paid over time.
What is your take on the back end in these private equity deals? And it's obviously multiple industries. What is your take on these promises of recapitalization and these numbers get funny? Like, I've seen numbers that, someone has an offer to sell their business for like $13 million, but the way they factor in the recapitalization on the holdback, it could end up being closer to $50 million. And it's just like funny money. And, I'm very skeptical of it personally,
Right.
but you know more about it than I. What's your perspective on it?
No, I think it's much like the earnout. You can't count on it necessarily. You really it's great to think about that, but a lot of times that's the only way someone will a private equity firm might want to buy a company is if they want you to continue to be an owner into the future. They may say, "Hey, I want to buy 80% of your company or 70% of your company today, but we're going to require that you stay in as an investor long term through what you mentioned, this recapitalization, as it's called." Really, that's a recapitalization of someone reinvesting in that new company going forward. It's hard to determine whether that will be successful or not. I mean, we've seen just as many cases of people that have done extremely well in that kind of situation. People who've actually, wish they'd put more money, wish they'd held on to a larger stake. And sometimes we've seen companies, that have transacted and done very well very rapidly. We had one that someone was able to double their money in 6 months inside that situation. And I need to have one of those lines that say past results are not not indicative of a future or not typical of all results. But so you do have to be cautious of that. I think all you can look at is you can look at the quality of the company making that offer, their track record. There's all this track records for private equity funds are generally fairly available. We have access to them. We can pull them up. We can see how they've done on those types of things. And you have to be a bit skeptical if you have a rather new group that doesn't have experience of long-term success, if you will. So it can be a bit scary.
Yeah. So if you met somebody, like I said earlier, at a bar and they're just telling you about them, and they're not your potential client for whatever reason, what kind of advice would you give the typical business owner that wants to sell, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they know they don't want to do this forever. They're starting to get burned out. What would you say to them?
Yeah, the best thing you can do is start to evaluate. I guess the first thing I have them do is work with an advisor like you. First of all, find out what their needs are in retirement. What do you need to live on? So once they have an idea of what they need, hopefully, when you look at the value of their company, the value of the company equals something close to that, and they can in fact retire as opposed to have to move on to another role or take on another job going forward. So that'd be the very first thing. The second thing is then just do an evaluation of your company. What are the things that a buyer is going to find less than attractive? We mentioned the owner dominance is one. Another could be customer concentration. You could have 40% of your business coming from one customer. Even though that's great to have a big, large customer, it's very risky. A business owner sees that and says, or a potential buyer sees that and says, wow, that's great. But the bad side is, let's say that company, because you retire, Mr. Owner, goes away. Let's say that customer just decides that they don't want to do business anymore with us as new owners. So that's another risk factor. But you need to look at all those risk factors, and there's a number of them, and talk to people such as ourselves, such as people that are in the business of helping to sell businesses. We know what those things are. We know what to look out for. We know how to best package those types of things. The other thing is, I guess I would say is, we talk. Those are sort of risk mitigating kind of factors. The other side of what a buyer is looking for is opportunity. What are the things you haven't been able to do as an owner of a company? Let's say I haven't been able to invest in salespeople. If I had one or two additional salespeople, I know I could really expand this company. If I had more talent, if I had access to international markets, if I had larger brand or larger presence as a company. I'm dealing with a company now that's done very well, but they're a small company. And that smallness of their company has restricted them from getting large contracts because large companies have been unwilling to do business with them as a small organization. And if they now they're looking to align with a larger company that gives them more financial resources, more risk mitigation, if you will, and their hopes are that would bring them a lot more business in the future.
Let's talk about Footprint Capital for a minute as we come to the end of our time together. You guys are based in Columbus, Ohio, but what's your geographic footprint for representing buyers and sellers? Are you nationwide? Are you regional? How does that work?
No, we do work across the country, and now COVID has gotten everybody sort of used to the whole virtual meeting process, and so with that, our business is all over the country. I've got clients today that I'm working on in Nashville, Las Vegas, Dayton, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, Detroit are the current stable of companies I'm working with. But we do business across the country. We've actually sold businesses overseas as well. We've worked in Canada. I sold a business during COVID in Canada, and we couldn't even get across the border to congratulate them when we closed the deal. We started it before COVID occurred. But with that, the virtual technologies now allow us and allow buyers, frankly, to search for companies all over the country. And so, inside that $2 to $10 million of annual earnings that we look for, anywhere in the U.S. is most typically our customer set.
So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, to pick your brain, to hire you, how would they do that?
Yeah. Well, certainly you can reach out to us. footprintcapital.com is the website. And I'm Michael Butler, of course. And, my email address, mbutler@footprintcapital.com. Or I'll give you my phone number here, 614-581-5088. And we're glad to talk to folks even well in advance of them considering doing something. And I would just say, it's not a bad investment of your time to be thinking about what the ultimate exit of your company might be well in advance of that, because there might be some things you need to do, some of which we've talked about today. And there's other things such as tax changes you might want to make. You might want to make some structural changes in your company to best situate it for the tax implication of a sale. And that's a whole other topic. We'll leave that to the CPAs. But with that, all those things are important to do and important to think about to maximize the exit value.
Michael, I really appreciate your time today. This has been a fascinating conversation. I could pepper you with questions for another 30 or 45 minutes.
Well, I've enjoyed the conversation. It's a deep topic, and all I can tell people is, one thing is sometimes people will attempt to sell a business on their own, and I really feel adamant, even though I'm a little bit biased because I'm in the business. I'm adamant of them getting some kind of advisory help from someone like myself to help them through the process. It's not an easy one, and so in a lot of ways that experience does count here. I
think the value created by working with someone like you far exceeds the cost of that type of relationship. Agreed. So you've been listening to the Exit Your Business Your Way podcast, and I'm Ross Brennan. We'll talk to you next time.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by PAS, Guardian, or North Florida Financial, and opinions stated are their own. External sites and materials are provided for your convenience in locating related information and services. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees expressly disclaim any responsibility for and do not maintain, control, recommend, or endorse third-party sites, organization, products, or services, and make no representation as to the completeness, suitability, or quality thereof. Ross is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS, OSJ 3664, Coolidge Court, Tallahassee, Florida, 32311, 850-562-9075. Security products and advisory services offered through PAS. Member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of North America, Guardian. New York. PAS is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. North Florida Financial is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. Arkansas Insurance License Number 16139-032. California Insurance License Number 0L10073. 2022-143574 expires 9/24.